Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We have two outstanding poets with us today, Vievee Francis and Maria Caponi. Vievee will read first and then Maria. Vievee Francis is the author of 4 books of poetry, most recently, The Shared World, Forest Primeval, winner of the 2017 Kingsley Tufts Award and the Hurston Wright Legacy Award, Horse in the Dark, winner of the Canham Northwestern University Press Poetry Prize, and Blue Tail Fly. Her work has appeared in numerous publications, including Poetry and Best American Poetry. She is also the recipient of a 2024 Guggenheim Fellowship and a 2021 Aiken Taylor Award for Modern American Poetry. She is a professor of English and creative writing at Dartmouth College. Here's a brilliant poet, Vievee Francis.
Thank you very much. I'm so happy to be here. I'm going to be reading work today from my latest book, The Shared World. It opens with an epigraph by Naomi Shiabnai, and I looked around that gate of late and weary ones, and I thought, this is the world I want to live in, the shared world. A call to arms. A call to arms came as the lanterns floated upward on a night of celebration, and as flares spun upward out of the fear of those who set them. As shawled women smiled in the night, prayed into the night, and just as many ran through the swallowing night. As a bed was shared between those shepherding each other, and as others shared nothing, nothing at all. As doctors took their oaths and committed to no harm, but privileged some and denied others, as another dies by the hands of a group of strangers, and another by the hand of her father, and another because a stranger was lost in the anger of his mother. I am telling you, the call to arms came as we slept, and as we marched, and as we questioned, and as we hid our heads in the dust of nostalgia or our spent dreams, as bills came due, as the debt grew and values diminished, as women decided other women mattered less, as we raged and as we ignored, and the doors began to close and close and close and close and close, and those who had opened them were marked for death or forgetting, and those who had kicked those doors down are marked for death or slander. And this is not the first time a call to arms has caught us imagining it had stopped. The call is constant. Don't you hear it? Don't you? What? It didn't ring out in a peal of bells? It rings out in the silent appeals of children. A child who cannot remember the name of their father. You aren't listening. And if you are listening, you need to keep your ear to the street, to the field, to the alleys and bridges, to the riverbed and floor planks of abandoned houses. And I heard the call to arms like a moan from a drain, desperately clogged, and in the lowing of cows in drought, and in the impotent drone of senators, that officious blather. And in this moment, I hear the call and realize I am not the lion, but the antelope, and I must resort to my feet and my wits amid a storm of teeth and claws. On a day that began as any other day, I can't tell you why I hear what so many refuse to admit, like the pounding of your own hearts upon hearing this. Break me, and I'll sing. My voice like marrow, a blood yolk spilled upon the counter. You can't stop this song. More hands than yours have closed around my throat. You may crack me. You have cracked me. I'm frightened, but so what? Witness, if you can. I slurped the frog leg soup gone bad. held a brass spoon like a barrel to my mouth. I could tell you what you want to hear, but I'd be broken just the same. So why not sing? I'm singing now, louder this time, and in the round. We are a wounding of red-plumed birds, every voice a bloody feather in the bone crown. Another attempt at the telling. This poem opens with an epigraph from Roberto Bolaño. The secret story is the one we'll never know, although we're living it from day to day. But we do know the secret story. At least we each know our own secret story, and when we grow brave enough, might share it. And if the party we share it with is honest, they might admit their own. And from there, hands held, we walk into the grotto and dip our hands into the cold waters, or meander up a darkened stairwell into the sweet musk of a bookshop, or descend into a speakeasy beyond a roped velvet curtain. The secret to knowing the secret is to speak, but we too often tell the stories of no matter and avoid the one story that does matter. In truth, we are all bound by one story, so you'd think by now we'd tell it, at least to each other. The shared world. Into the bow of your ear, I did whisper the secret story. Now you can't sleep either. Consider it part of your own memory connecting our childhoods that would have otherwise never crossed. I fell down and your knee was scraped. I stuffed the yellow cake into my mouth and your stomach cramped. When you were abandoned, grief filled my well. The private ravages of our spent youth and adulthood, now implicitly intimate. You pull me to you because I have already softened your sharp elbows. The pressure of your fingers in my shoulder leaves an impression as if in need I had touched myself. We are insomniacs, the grip of night freeing us from the slept through day and its demands. It is true, once you know, you can't unknow. So we ruminate on literature and the gods and continually seek the usya of the emptied jug. But we need no wine, really. We are eager to get on with it, to take in or do whatever forwards this living, this tripwire, keeping us tied, kite to string, present to past, arrow to quiver. Given to rest. Every time I open my mouth, my teeth reveal more than I mean to, but I can't stop tonguing them, my teeth. Almost giddy to know they're still here. My mother lost all of hers by this time, but I am embarrassed nonetheless that even they aren't pretty. Still, I did like my voice once, the way it moved through the gap in my teeth like birdsong in the morning, like the slow swirl of a creek at dusk. Just yesterday, a woman closed her eyes as I read aloud and said she wanted to sleep in the sound of it, my voice. I can still sing some. Early cancer didn't stop the compulsion to sing, but there's gravel now, an undercurrent that reveals me, time and disaster, a landslide down the mountain. When you stopped speaking to me, what you really wanted was for me to stop speaking to you, to stifle the sound of my voice. I know. Didn't want the quicksilver of it in your ear. What does it mean to silence another? It means I ruminate on the hit of rain against the tin roof of childhood, how I could listen all day until the water rusted its way in. And there I was, putting a pan over here and a pot over there to catch it. And my final poem. I'm currently speaking to you from New York City, and I wrote a libretto for an opera on the death of Eric Garner, but it wound up also speaking to the death of his daughter, who died from an asthma attack, not being able to breathe. When your brother dies, you want nothing more than to be held by your brother, and within that absence, to be held by another. It will take that to cry it through. And if there is no one to do so, if there is an embrace, but it does not last long enough, you may never feel the joy of wailing. Instead, you may hold that cry for years, until no one ever knew you needed to cry at all, until you believe you are free of tears, until one day standing at the sink, the water running hot over your knuckles, you double over, and that long-held cry escapes in a gasp, a memory of that body in convulsion, the sickbed or the street, the smell of his death so close you forget there are people with you in the room and you almost let go before you are reminded that day is done and there is work before you to do. So you straighten up and continue to do whatever it was you were doing. You close the valve of that ache and swallow whatever comes up. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Vievee. You're just such an incredible poet. You have such strength of narrative and a superlative use of language. And your poetry is so vivid and vital, and it's so full of humanity, and it's so deep. And you just sing gloriously. And, you have a great sense of a use of objective correlative and your use of allusions and similes. I mean, you're personal, but you're personal poet, but you don't use I a lot, at least from what I've read and heard, and yet we're all included. The shared world. That's what you're saying there too. To my point of view, could you just a couple of questions, then we'll talk a little bit more about your writing, but could you just tell us a little bit about when you wrote your first poem?
Well, thank you for your kind words. I'm here in New York because the opera will be opening on Friday, and so I'm just having such an emotional day, and it's marvelous to be able to be here and to breathe with you all and speak on these things, because poetry is quite the love of my life. So I wrote my first poem. I know most poets write very early on. I started reading poetry early at maybe about 5 years old. I read my father's textbooks that he had kept, English textbooks that had poems in them. And I wrote my first poem at 19 years old. It was awful. The young students I teach, they write so brilliantly. And one day I'm going to actually show them a poem I kept from 19, and I turned 60 on New Year's Eve. So I've been writing a long time. They are writing like 30-year-olds. They're writing so brilliantly, and I was terrible. It was all about boys. So, but I think I'm a self-taught poet, so I did do the MFA, but it was after my first book and long after I had finished college, where I studied English but not poetry writing. So at 19, I just started writing, and I kept writing. I couldn't stop, to the chagrin of my father, who wanted me to be a lawyer, where I'm much too emotional for that. But that, to answer your question, 19, and it was awful work.
What is it about the poetry form that attracts you to it?
Because it allows for the emotive, it allows for emotional expression. I grew up in a household where I was to be quiet and still, and the family was emotional but did not necessarily talk about it. And I was constantly wanting to, as Seamus Heaney describes, dig. I wanted to get underneath. I wanted to understand everything. And when I started reading poetry, there it was, people who were unafraid to actually commit to paper what they were feeling, to interrogate the world at large, to speak to things on the page that couldn't be said in everyday conversation. And I was full of those things. I was hungering for that. And early on thought of poets as my people, and then later thought maybe I could be in their number.
Well, I've read a few of your other poems that you have that you didn't read today, and I remember there's one, I don't remember the name of the poem, but you're talking about a man and how he, put his arms around you like he was your mother, and then at the end,
Yes.
you see some lines about, he was like a mother to me, and he made me believe that I was as beautiful as I thought I thought I'd be. And those aren't exactly the words, but it's pretty close. But it just really, your sense of love, and also, another poem you read about physical abuse, and you just you have such a way of writing that's so much created out in the world that we can all share, and yet I can just feel that the outpouring of your soul and your who you are inside, and yet it's told in such extraordinary language. How do you, you're a teacher, so what would you say the difference between you and like a confessional poet is, if you do believe that? But you just really include us all. The shared world tells it all. So I don't know if there's a clear question in there, but you kind of understand what I'm just trying to locate you as, where do you place yourself in the poetry world in terms of voice, or, I don't know. I'm a little vague right there, but I hope you can get a little bit sense of what I'm looking for.
Well, the first poem you were speaking of, it's called Beauty and Beast, or Beast and Beauty. I might have inverted it, and it's in Forest Primeval, where I'm clearly speaking to pastoralists, and I'm arguing in Forest Primeval that America is a wilderness, that it's not a meadow, it's not a place of necessarily peace. I see America as a wilderness. And so in a wilderness, there's constant danger. There's a constant pressure to stake one's claim. So that goes the title, but within that, my husband, who the poem is about, had moved us from the urban center that is Detroit, Michigan, to Asheville, North Carolina, or really Swannanoa. And we were living on a mountainside. So I was constantly thinking about wilderness and fairy tales, and thinking about Germany's Black Forest. All of these things kind of merged in my mind. But Matthew Scott Osman is my husband, and he's a poet in his own right. And that was how I felt about him, that he had provided me with such a fulsome care. And it was so fulsome that it was both paternal in the best sense and maternal as well. He was a fully nurturing creature. And it's only within the realm of fairy tale that I could find, get that sense of how magical it was to me that he embraced me that way, after having had a good deal of violence in my life. As far as where I place myself inside of poetry, that's another reason I titled my third book Forest Primeval, because I'm speaking to lineage, and I'm speaking to the way we determine lineage. And for so long, we've determined it through gender and race, and this is false. And I very much see it as false. Yes, gender and race are inform what we write, but it doesn't determine the poet. So people would constantly compare me, say, to Lucille Clifton. Lucille Clifton was not my North Star. She was my husband's North Star. And and my husband is German Filipino American. So outside again of his background, but that's the poet he looked to and found inspiration through. So I was inspired by Lucille Clifton, but really my North Star would be outside of my gender because it would be Robert Hayden and also Robert Browning, but also Wisława Szymborska. It was a North Star for me. So I wanted to push back against old ideas of what lineage is, the people who influence us, the people whose books we read, the people whose ideas we incorporate. That's how lineage should be determined, period. And so I see myself as far as confessionalism goes, the confessionalist, that's a particular time and period where they open up American poetry to a kind of interior examination that hadn't happened before. But now we're several generations out where confessionalism has become something else altogether. Now we're looking at various modes of investigation. We're not just saying what happened to us, but it becomes an emotional link for what might be happening with others as well. So it moves outside of the I. It opens it up for a more universal I, if you will. I hope that's making sense. In my mind, that's making sense.
No, it makes a lot of sense to me. And, I just to kind of let you in on me, like when I read some of your poetry, the one, The Beast and the Beauty or Beauty and the Beast, and then a few others, the one where you have rifles and then you're ready to protect against any danger, and you end something like with the barbed wire and without gloves, how you put that up and then so that, and then also just to bring in another person, I read the poetry of Julia Alvarez, and she wrote a book called The Woman I Kept to Myself. And, listening to your poetry, listening to hers, even though I'm not a woman, I feel, all that. We all, have similar feelings, right? And so I just feel so touched, and I feel so blessed, to be able to just read and understand the best I'm able to read, understand, and to hear new poets such as yourself. So thank you for that. You may have already told me this in your discussion, but who are some of the poets who influenced you before you began writing in a serious, regular way?
Oh, before I'm writing seriously. Okay. The poet she's always listed as being born in Arizona, but I actually believe she was born in Texas. The poet I began so AI, for those who don't know, the poet's name is AI. And she just went by that one name. Not her original name, but her chosen name, which is the name I respect. When I first read her, I had never read anyone who could write the villain with compassion. And it stretched my idea of who we are as humans, what we take in, who we give empathy to, and why. And I read it at a Borders bookstore. We don't have Borders anymore. In an old journal. The poem, I think, was Child Beater. I think that's what it's called. And I just laid my head down and started weeping at the cafe table in Borders. And like I began as a poet who only did persona poems. I would not write about myself. It took me a long time to write with my personal I. So she was one. Another person that I did mention before would be Robert Browning. And interestingly, just like the poet he wrote dramatic monologues. So in my first book of poems, Blue Tail Fly, almost the entire book, I think all except one poem are all dramatic monologues. So those were the first two poets to really kind of get in there right before I became a serious writer.
Well, you're very erudite and very clear when you talk, and I appreciate that. We have a couple minutes left. Could you just tell us a little bit about where you were born and raised, and then your journey into, maybe you already mentioned the journey into poetry, but just a little bit about your background?
I was born in San Angelo, Texas, which is where my father was born as well in 1963. So whenever I say that, I tell people I was born into Jim Crow because that informs part of why I write what I write. My worst fear was that I'd wake up one day and I'd be inside of Jim Crow again. The structures and the infrastructures of Jim Crow became part of the structural material within me. I'm several generations Texan on both sides. So people who had farms, people who rode horses, people who lived in small towns often. Very close community, very large clan of Texans. And my father was in the Army, so I'm an Army brat. I lived at Fort Sill, I lived at Fort Ord, and there are probably more that I can't remember. I was very tiny. And then my father eventually would come to work for General Motors, and they would move him from place to place. So I lived in Atlanta and found my way to Detroit, where I lived for 30 years, and where I met my husband and married him.
You really blessed our program with your poetry and the clarity of what we've spoken about, and I appreciate that. And you've just moved me, deeply. So I deeply appreciate, your presence on the program today. To me, poetry, I love it too. And this show is a sacred place where we create communion and listen to each other and create harmony, and so I'm really thankful for it. So thank you once again for a marvelous poetry reading, Vievee Francis.
I feel grateful for you all having me here. I feel, forgive me, I feel very weepy. I'm so happy that you had me, and thank you for your kind words. I can tell that you love poetry the way I love poetry, which means that I just love you. So thank you very much.
Well, we could go on and talk forever. I'd love to hear more about you, but, as they say, television waits for no man or no woman. So our next poet is Maria Caponi. Maria Caponi was born and grew up in Buenos Aires, Argentina. An only child with imaginary friends, she spent a large part of her waking hours making up stories and working on mathematical equations. She has a PhD in physics and astronomy from the University of Maryland and a creative fiction writing certificate with distinction from the University of California, Los Angeles. When she is not traveling, she lives in Manhattan Beach, California. Her debut memoir, An Accidental Pilgrim, a memoir in prose and verse, was released on February 14, 2024. Maria is currently completing a collection of poems and working on a series of personal essays. Here's a superlative poet, Maria Caponi.
Thank you so much. It's difficult to follow up on Vievee. That was an excellent reading, and I was as moved as you were, maybe, by her reading. So it is hard for me to follow that up, but it is interesting to me that we come from completely different backgrounds, completely different, original values, and I still can feel what she reads as if it were part of myself. So empathy through poetry, I guess. I am going to read from my recent book, which is called An Accidental Pilgrim. And if there is some time, I would like to read a few poems of my recent work, which is kind of a different kind of work or poetry. So my book starts with something which is like a caveat emptor, which says, as any work of narrative fiction, it is part real, part imagination, and part exaggeration. So take what I say like that. It is a memoir, but it is that kind of memoir. And also it is a memoir of a journey and of many journeys. So I say a journey starts when we say it does, and it ends when we realize we are no longer there. And although the structure is based on a hike of El Camino de Santiago in northern Spain, it contains and is layered by many journeys throughout my childhood and being an only woman in a field of men, or a graduate or an immigrant, and so on. And my first poem in the book says, Intention. I walk and hear inside my head, Caminante no hay camino, se hace camino al andar. I translate, for the friends who will walk with me part of the way. Wayfarer, walker, there is no path. You make the path as you go. We are all voyagers, wanderers, traveling in time, a journey unknown until we make it up. But my friends, they still don't understand. And two lines of this poem are from Proverbios and Cantares from Antonio Machado, a well-known that says, Caminante no hay camino, se hace camino al andar. Twisted bark. I wrote this when we spread the ashes from my husband. Twisted bark, I see you on my daily walk, ascending the hill 200 steps. A piece of twisted bark by the side of the old wooden stairs. A gray, brittle, odd-shaped husk. Looks like the back of two legs, chest and head buried in the soil, where we sprinkle your ashes, white, fine dust. Where you and I stepped together, Thanksgiving, that last time, our sons and I scatter you. So much white powder, an urn full dispersed under the canopy, deep root ancient trees. And this is about how I travel, because I travel a lot. How I travel. You travel light, he said, the passerby on my way, as I walk, carry on hand, the streets of Paris or Firenze, maybe San Miguel de Allende in Mexico, or somewhere in Jerusalem, or perhaps Spain, I forget. I travel heavy, I said. I carry a shadow on my arm, a chip on my shoulder, the guilt of being here while others are gone. I carry some confidence, lots of courage, and all the memories stored inside my head. It is hard to lift what I carry. All the images, the sounds, the smells and tastes of other trips, of other walks, of the same places or similar, now different. While I travel to lighten my load, I make up stories in my head. I rush, bounce, and prance on the gray cobblestone steps. I travel with joy and anxiety. I watch people walk in couples with dogs, alone, Eyes fixed ahead, looking for a friend. I exhilarate. Is that the verb? Or maybe I just elate, rejoice, stimulate. I sigh with relief. I take pictures. A memory of the wooden door pattern, the strip red and green fabric, the woman on the street cooking churros, sometimes anticuchos, empanadas, maybe crepes, in case I forget. I tear up with sadness, sometimes happiness, and all the time I look ahead to this journey I have embarked upon, not yet at its end. And we will go back in time. This is called Flower Child, 1969. And it's kind of a prose poem or just prose. Humid summer, yellow and green street bell-bottoms, glass pipes and bongs in head shop windows, red flowers braided into her waist-length hair. She holds her lover's hand as they walk side by side through a rainbow of primary colors. Boho vests mix with plaid shorts or the psychedelic patterns of the long skirts. The sounds of like a rolling stone coming from inside a record store. She watches and listens, detects the pungent, musky smell unbeknownst to her until then, unable to believe she now inhabits this utopian world. Birkenstocks on their feet, they walk to their car, a magical blue 1960 Pontiac convertible with blue leather seats that goes fast on the new highways. She stands up on the bucket seat on the passenger side while her lover drives, oblivious to the rules of the road, invulnerable to danger. A white blouse embroidered with hummingbirds flowing in the wind. The promised land, a world of possibility ahead. When the future comes, she will always remember this feeling inside herself. When she was a child, she wished to be Doris Day, to live in that enchanted land of the movies. She sang Que sera, sera, ignorant of the meaning of its lyrics or the plot of the movie in which it was sung. In her mind, she saw a knight in shining armor, the Príncipe Azul, who would come and lift her onto his white horse, take her to America, North America, a land of bright colors under a sunny sky. She remembers her wish when she touches his shoulder, steals a kiss. Afterwards, she sits back again in the cool leather seat next to him and imagines them riding forever towards the sunny horizon as the titles come down, the end, in shiny letters. That was before she knew that this dream she wanted to call home, this enchanted land, North America, could be gray instead of yellow or blue or red, that the magical Pontiac would be stolen and then impounded for profit instead of returned by the state police, that the National Guard would be called to break a student protest and then would see military uniforms entering a university again. And going back to this hike in El Camino, something that happened after I fell, and it is called Tu Molina Seca. Those younger than we are might carelessly stride, maybe even jump from stone to stone, I imagine, since there is nobody on the path except the two of us, struggling down the trail, one leg, one foot at a time. The beauty almost lost. It is magnificent, I know, but I can't look, can't gaze at the luscious green all around me as I step, step, step. each step deliberate, and the next while I hold the hiking pose as if holding for dear life. Meanwhile, I worry, I calculate. At this rate, even if it is only 2, maybe 3 kilometers to town, it will take 3 hours, more if one of us happens to fall. Not an ill thought. This morning I fell over jagged rocks. Distracted after I turn back, I am lucky, maybe stubborn or strong, with no bones broken, just a gash on my chin. 5 hours later, I am still on this trail. Now, a primitive fear sets in of losing strength, of losing the still early evening light. My friend behind me can't distinguish death after dusk. I feel my legs quiver, my feet become unsteady. I can't see an end to this steep, uneven descent between dark vines, small streams, in the shade of the aspen trees. But I convince myself I have conquered fear. I did it during yesterday's hike. So today I negotiate with a God I don't believe in, with the essence of myself, with a human conscience, with the source of creation. I promise, if I make it, if I am safe, I'll, what? I drew a blank until it comes to me while I try one more step over a large boulder, 2 uneven rocks, some mile. I'll be more mindful, a gentler person. I will restrain my inner sarcasm. I will listen. Can I change? And then 2 minutes later, there is a variation in the rock trail from slippery stones, crumbling rocks, large roots to a gentle gravel path. We stop, look around, a fairy tale landscape. Lush green meadows, a farmhouse on the hill, next to it, a blooming tree. And before it is too late, we see the sign on the road, Molina Seca, population 818. Our fists go up, we breathe relief, we envision the end. And now I have to see, how can I do this gentle thing? And this is a poem for my mother, and maybe I should read first this other poem that is called I Smile to Pain. Because I am perceived as aloof, as if I brush off the words, because I can hide my emotions, look strong, because I don't cry and I smile a lot. It is assumed that I can easily deal with reproach, that I can manage pain. But I can't. It is an attitude, maybe the arrogance some of us learn if we have to mother ourselves after we turn 10. Inspiration. Inside my mother's bedroom, I sit on the wooden floor and listen to the clicking noise, the ritual afternoon sound of the treadle sewing machine. I whine. I am bored. And then again, I have nothing to play with. I complain. Her foot stops the back and forth on the pedal. She raises her green eyes from the small stitches, joining blue fabric and white thread. A pause, a moment, and then with pursed lips and a frown. Use your imagination, she says, and the stitching continues, the fabric gliding out of the machine again. I am 8 years old, a single child with freckles and imaginary friends. I stare at the specks of dust that stream in the sunlight and scatter from my hands. In the quiet afternoon, my mother's foot keeps on the pedal that drives the wheel, that moves the fabric, held tight by her hands under the needle. And This poem is called How I Became Me Again. I dance, although they asked me how I could. I no longer ate beef or potatoes and seldom pasta. I ate salads. I didn't drink tea until one night I found herbal tea. I changed one burned light bulb and then I changed two. I took the trash out. I got mad at the neighbor when he asked that I hide the trash cans. I forgave the neighbor and put empty trash cans in the garage. I did my taxes. I wrote single instead of married. I learned to drill. I danced some more. I created morning routines, breakfast, Zumba, walk to the beach. I created evening routines, write, then stretch the limbs. I traveled alone. I kept a journal. I wrote one poem, and then I wrote two. I leaned on my children until I didn't. I became strong. I lifted weights. I didn't get a Christmas tree. I went on long trips. I wrote some prose. I photographed doors and twisted twigs. I went to the synagogue. That didn't last long. I spoke to the cactus, chat with the roses, discuss with the palm trees. I took long walks. I take long walks. I had a dog. I have a dog. I took a nap on the couch. I went to bed late. I found new friends, but I kept the old. I smiled at the strangers. I released my private life to Facebook and Instagram. I kept some secrets. I found recipes and cooked up a storm. I cooked a turkey, turned the dishwasher on. One night, I heard a mockingbird sing, and then a nightingale. I opened my door. I ran on the grass with the dog. I saw a hummingbird. I will read a poem that is called Once Again, I Am Back. I am back today, back to the city of bright artificial lights. I am back to the pink and yellow sunsets, whispering ocean, blooming orange poppies and daffodils. Back from the mountains, dust, dry grass, uneven, narrow cobblestone streets, loud music, tacos, and ochre walls. Back from under gray skies, cold rain, blue wine, Christmas craft markets, Belgian French fries. I am back from the land of ambers, piano, cello, and violin concerts, Holocaust memories of destruction and death. Back from strong coffee, empanadas, and jacarandas, impossible inflation, and crazy peso conversion. I am back, and after each trip I tell myself, march, dance, move fast to the next. One day I say, stay, but I leave again, to the land of spirits this time, to the blue and green land of healers and scooters, offerings and burning incense, temples and shrines raising to the sky, covering sarongs, red, blue, and black and white, that fascinated I observe but fail to understand. And then, once again, I am back. For a long time, I say, but really, until I leave once again, or I get to the non-negotiable end. And just let me finish with this poem from my book that is called Perpetual Traveler. My brain is en route to Paris, while my body is in Madrid, but my feet still walk the Camino trail and my dreams are full of green. Images of teal fields, songs of cuckoo birds, a rooster's crow, the sheep's bleating, the smell of earth, wine, olives, and manure mixed in the breeze. Next to my bed, my boots tell the stories while I fall asleep. Thank you.
Thank you for such a vivid, personal, imaginative journey. It's a procession, and it's emotional and it's strong. You're such a strong narrative writer, and it's also vulnerable, and it's very moving. And I like your use of specifics, and you used a phrase with a human conscious. You have that, and we feel that with you. And there's also a comfort the way you take us with you. And you are back. You're back, and I just appreciate your writing so much. I love your mother. Your writing about your mother, and so thank you very much for such a wonderful reading, Maria. Could you tell us when you wrote your first poem?
I probably cannot, but because maybe I have to say I am a late bloomer, a very late bloomer poem. And I call myself an accidental poet. And the reason is, although I have been writing since I was a small child, and I wanted to be a writer until I was 10, but then I discovered I was very good at math. And that changed my direction. I became a PhD in physics instead. But I never forgot the love of writing. I would write on my journal to my father every day, a letter every day. And these days, when I read those letters, I realized that they were written in prose, but they have rhythm, which I think is what has attracted me to poetry. Because I always thought I didn't like poetry, although I love some of the songs, but I never thought I liked poetry. And maybe what I have to say, the first time I actually wrote a poem that I recognize as such probably was only 20 years ago. But I think that, and it was a poem about like an empty house. It was, of course, terrible. Maybe it was an empty house because my kids were about to leave the nest or something like that. But I think I always had the rhythm. What I always like about poems is not just the content, which is sometimes I have started to recognize content in poems, the fact that you can tighten your emotions in a certain way in a poem that you can't in prose. But I am always very attracted to rhythm, and that is how I wrote my prose. So, maybe the first poem I wrote, maybe that was recognized as such and published, probably was only like 6 years ago or something like that. So that is my story.
It's great to hear your writing. Before you began writing poetry in a serious, regular way, who are some of the poets who influenced you?
Well, I grew up in Argentina, in Buenos Aires. So my poets were like Pablo Neruda or Garcia Lorca or Rubén Darío. I don't know if those are well-known poets to you, but to me, that is. And so that was the reason, because of all the poetry I had to learn in school, because we do have to learn poetry in school. Garcia Lorca was the one that was emotional to me, because first of all, because of the passion, because of Spain, because of, what was going on in 1936 in Spain. And so that affected me, although I wasn't born at the time, but, it was almost like a song, a song of fighting. And, we had in Argentina, as I was growing up and I was going to the university, we had protests and problems there. So those were, I would say, the ones that really influenced me, and the rhythm of Garcia Lorca, the passion, influenced me. Pablo Neruda, some of what he wrote also influenced me. Now it's more like English. I have been writing in English for 40 years or whatever. So it's more the American poets. But there is a big difference between the two types of poetry, I think.
I like your accidental pilgrim. A journey has always been a great convention in American poetry, and thank you very much. Vievee, could you come on for a minute or two? We just have a couple minutes left, but I just want to thank both of you for such a marvelous reading. You both come from different backgrounds, and as I do too, from all of you, and yet somehow we have this communion that we feel in terms of poetry. It's something that's greater than me, and I've learned the tradition. I keep learning more. I mean, there's so many great women poets in our time, and when they write about their ancestry and among other things, it just really is enlightening to me. And both of you have really enhanced my life and my understanding of poetry and how you both work, and the poetry itself obviously is what's important. So I just want to thank you both once again for such a wonderful reading. And so thank you, Vievee Francis, and thank you very much, Maria Caponi. And now I'm going to announce next week's poetry reading. Next Tuesday, the superb poets David Garyan and Polly Geller will be with us, and they're both wonderful poets. David Garyan has been doing he is in Italy. He's been doing a series on California poets, and he's done a tremendous amount, which is pretty valuable for all of us in California and outside of California. So it's been a glorious reading, and it uplifts me. Sometimes I won't feel good, and yet I'll just rest and then do the poetry show, and it always lifts me up. And this certainly has been an exhilarating and uplifting poetry hour for me. So thank you once again, Vievee Francis and Maria Caponi. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Harry. I really appreciate this opportunity. Thank you very much to MFTV, and thank you.
Thank you. And it was good to read with you, Maria. I'm really excited with your work. I wrote down several of your endings, in particular, the way you close. Very moving. And the love poems, very moving.
I'll get back to you. Your call to arms poem is like a call to arms to me, almost. It's really, it was, I wrote a number of things too, because, it impacted me. And so I am glad about it. Thank you. And thank you, Harry, for putting us together.